Pharaoh stood horrified at the effects of the plagues that had been poured out upon Egypt. There had been inconvenience and hardship, discomfort, illness, economic loss from the water being turned to blood, from the frogs and the lice and the flies, from the livestock epidemic, the boils, the hail, and the locusts. The nation had sustained great loss in the death of their cattle. Many of their people had been killed by the hail. The forests were broken down, and the crops that weren't destroyed by the hail were eaten by the locusts. And the whole land was devastated. They were fast losing everything that they had gained by the labor of the Hebrews. And the whole nation now is threatened with starvation. And so the counselors said to Pharaoh, "Let the men go, that they may serve their God. Knowest thou not yet that Egypt is destroyed?" And this is where we're going to pick our study up this morning in the 10th chapter of the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 10, and beginning with verse 8. "And Moses and Aaron were brought again unto Pharaoh, and he said unto them, Go serve the Lord your God, but who are they that shall go? And Moses said, We will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds we will go, for we must hold a feast unto the Lord. And he said unto them, Let the Lord be so with you, as I will let you go, and your little ones look to it, for it is evil before you. Not so. Go now ye that are men, and serve the Lord, for that ye did desire. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence." You see, Pharaoh had endeavored to destroy the Israelites by hard labor, but he now pretended to have a deep interest in their welfare and a tender care for the children. His real object was to keep the women and children as surety that the men would come back. So basically he says, let the adults go if they want to, but you leave the children here. And friends, one of the greatest problems facing the church today is the fact that so many of the children and the young people are still in Egypt. And they're there with the approval of their parents. You know, even the most godly parents want worldly prosperity and position for their children. We all long for that. They want their children to find success and approval in Egypt. You know, one of the most important things that we can give our children is an education. But do you realize where most Seventh-day Adventist young people receive their education? You see, the public school system is one that has more of God's remnant people in it than all of our systems put together in this country. And the public schools, now consider this, have been strictly forbidden to teach religion. And friends, an education that is not theistic or religious is of necessity atheistic. Either you have God or you do not have God. There is no middle ground. And in the public school systems, you can teach witchcraft, you can teach Hinduism, Buddhism, and any other isms that you want to, but Christianity is forbidden. You can teach incantations for Wicca, but you can't pray. Why do you think so many of our schools are closing? Why do you think so many of our young people are leaving the church? Do you know that most of the leaders within our church, behind the conflicts in the church today, received their degrees from the universities of the world out there? The Philistine, Babylonian, Egyptian concepts. God calls out to us today, and He will call out one final time in the future, where are your children, O Israel? Have you left them in Egypt? Who is teaching them? Is it the house of Pharaoh? Remember, it is Pharaoh who said, I know not the Lord, and neither will I hearken unto His voice. Who is the Lord, that I should obey His voice? Do we send our children into these type of religious systems, and do so willingly? And we, and some of the excuses I've heard with, well, I have to pay tax. I can't believe this one, but I heard it just the other day again. Well, we have to pay taxes in the public schools. We might as well get our money's worth out of it. Do you believe that? We're going to send them out there because we're having to pay taxes out there. We'll talk about that concept of our possessions later, too. Often our children are provided with the very best medical, dental, and optical care that is out there. Their teeth are given very special attention. We even go get them little occlusal guides and braces, and we buy whitening strips for them. I don't, never did, but I know people that do, for children. Their eyes, their tonsils, their posture is looked after. Their appearances and social graces, to a large degree, are not neglected. However, it's getting worse today. Their appearances become so ridiculous that they're almost comedic. Their social graces are basically non-existent anymore. It is becoming such that we can hardly tell Seventh-day Adventist young people from young people out there in the gangs. What is going on? I believe it's part of the reason is that we are afraid to stand by what we profess. I've had parents come to me and say, what am I going to do, Pastor? My child doesn't like to go to church. Should I make him come to church with me? But they're still a child? Yes. There is a point where you can't do that anymore. But these parents are afraid that if they make their child come to church when they'd rather stay home and watch Mickey Mouse or something, that the child will not want to go to Sabbath school or church ever. They'll grow up hating the church and not want anything to do with it. But I ask these people, what if your child decides they don't want to go to school?
Wow.
They don't want to go to school. Are you afraid that he's going to grow up hating knowledge and not want to go to college if you make him go to school in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade? What if a child doesn't like to wash behind their ears? There's a lot of them that don't. Are you afraid that if you make him scrub behind his ears that he'll grow up as a dirty old man and never want to take a bath again? And then again, what if Sabbath morning rolls around and that Sabbath morning is cold, snowy, rainy, dreary, any of those little adjectives you want to put on it. And the child says, It's cold. Are we going to go to church or are we going to stay home? Oh no, we'll stay home and have church at home today. And maybe, perhaps, in some of the better circumstances, they might pull out a devotional book and read for about 5 minutes and they've had church. But they get to stay home because it's a bad day out there. And then here comes Monday morning again. Monday morning rolls around and it's even colder. More rain, more snow, more everything than there was on Sabbath. But the same rules don't apply. No, you have to go to school. I have to go to work. Well, what have we just told the child? You see, the secular is more important than the spiritual. We can stay home from church because it's bad, but we can't stay home from work.
Preach.
We can't stay home from school. Those are required.
Yes.
And thus we're bringing up a generation of young people who are being taught by their parents that religion is not important and that the cultivation of the soul is not a very serious matter at all. They've been told that it's more important to go to school or to go to work. It's more important to learn about arithmetic than to go to church and learn about God. And we wonder why we have problems. We tend to put more emphasis on the scholastic rather than on the spiritual.
Yes.
But I want to ask you today, what good is your child's education if they don't know God? I was talking to my grandson the other day about, he's really into presidents. He wanted to be everything from a golf court, or, the guys at Walmart that drive the little golf carts around. He wanted that as a job when he gets older. He's gone to that. He wants to be a doctor. And then the other day he decided he just might like to be a president because he'd been studying these presidents and there's some pretty good guys in there. That's quite a jump, isn't it, from golf cart at Walmart to President of the United States. But you see, in those early years, kids' minds are working. And they're really looking toward things that are going to be in the future. And what kind of a path do we set before them? What kind of guidance do we give to these young children? If these children grow up and they can have the biggest numbers and letters after their name of anybody in the world, but if they are spiritually illiterate and spiritually dead, what good is the praise of men and the titles that come with it?
Amen.
That is a question that we might all have to answer to God someday if we leave our children in Egypt. Do you know that as we've been studying through these plagues, we've overlooked a few things that I'm going back to deal with today. I want to take some time to consider the desperate efforts of Pharaoh to escape the ravages of these plagues and still keep the Hebrews as slaves. Remember, he keeps saying, all right, we'll let you go, and then he changes his mind. But in there where he's saying, all right, I'll let you go, he's perverted the commands of God and tries to give a different thing. 4 times Pharaoh suggested changes or perversions to what God had required, and all 4 times Moses rejected them. This one that we've just looked at here, you that are men can go, but you leave your little ones behind. Moses says, I'm not going to do it. This is the third of the compromises. The first one we looked at several weeks ago, but we didn't talk about the compromise involved. Go back to chapter 8 with me. Chapter 8 and verse 25. You see, Moses had come and said, we want to go, and we're going to go 3 days' journey where? Into the wilderness. We're going to leave Egypt, and we're going to go 3 days away. And in verse 25 of chapter 8, Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron and said, "Go ye, sacrifice to your God," where?
In your land.
In the land. Okay, we're going to let you go sacrifice. So we touched on it briefly. But you're going to have to do it where? In Egypt. Worship your God if you've got to, but you stay here in this part of the world to do it. You don't have to go very far away. You can worship Him right here. And friends, today we have people who are still saying much the same thing. Well, you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. Well, that might be true, but it sure does help. And if you're not going to church and you say you're a Christian and there's a church there, you might want to check to see if you're lying to yourself. Because a Christian does what God says, does he not? And does not God say, "Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together"? All you have to do, and this is very prevalent today, is to believe. To worship God any way you want. You don't have to follow any set rules. You don't have to make any changes in your life. You know who one of the greatest promoters of that is today? No, a human being. He's where the devil's behind it. I was listening to her just yesterday. Everybody here knows the woman. She is the greatest agent of the devil to spread spiritism in the world today, and her name is Oprah. Have you been following what Oprah's been teaching? I heard her say on the tube, Jesus isn't the only way to get to heaven. All of the religions of the world are all headed to the same place, just on different paths. That she said she got very upset when she was 27 years old at a Baptist church she was attending, because the pastor there was talking about how God is omniscient, omnipotent, and all-loving and all-caring, and He's a very jealous God. And she says, when he said that, just something just didn't seem right in my spirit, that God can't be a jealous God and be that kind of a God. And so because she didn't understand the meaning even of the phrase, and doing what an intelligent woman like her is supposed to do, and try to figure out what was meant by that, she just thinks of jealous in the setting of a green-eyed little monster, and she rejected the God of heaven, and now believes that God and our salvation is even found in us. You want to know some of those things. There's some books out there of what she said. There's some things on the internet now that are airing some of her shows. She's promoting a spiritualist today and his book, where you don't worry about anything. God is all-loving. He's all-encompassing. He's in everything. He's in you. And you don't worry about any set teachings, any doctrines, any beliefs. Beliefs have got to be thrown out the window. She was interviewing the guy that is her mentor, and she asked him, "What do you think happens when a person dies?" He says, "I don't know. Don't care. Not even interested." He says, "Beliefs don't play into it anywhere. You just have your feeling that God loves you." That's the key word in it, feeling. This is what's happening today. You don't have to believe. You don't have to obey. You don't have to follow anything, since belief is out the window. You worship God any way you want to. No set rules, and you don't have to make any changes in your life. It was interesting, at one point she should have cased her audience a little bit better, because when she started in on some of this, there were some Christian ladies in there that took her to task when they were saying, when she was talking about life outside of Jesus Christ. And at one point she just kind of finally put up her hand and said, "Well, I don't want to argue religion with you. Well, of course not. She was losing the argument. And she went on to something else. You see, the concept is stay here in the land. Worship God if you want to, but do it here and be one of us. We're all together going the same way. We just might be on some different paths getting there. And so as an example of that, we see things such as what Oprah is promoting as one of the most powerful women in the world. But we see things happening in the churches, such as male strippers. Can you believe it? I've got clippings. Belly dancing being taught in some of the churches. Matter of fact, somebody told me, who was it told me? Somebody told me, oh, Jim, where'd he go? Who told me that? John. You know, they went over to the school outing, and they were doing, there were some belly dancers there. They went over to where the belly dancers were, and John says, that's too much belly for me. You see, but that's one thing out there in a secular environment, but they teach it in churches today. Drinking. I got a clipping of one church that they've actually put a bar in the basement downstairs. So you think it's bad when they have coffee and donuts. Some of them have even gone beyond that now. Adultery is accepted in the church. Smoking. I was sharing with the class today, a Lutheran minister friend of mine several years ago took all of the ashtrays out of the Lutheran church that he was pastor of. They had them mounted on the walls in this big foyer of this huge church. Next week he was fired. Had to go all the way across the country to get another church. The celebration movement that's going on within the remnant today. Sabbath work problem. Oh, well, nothing wrong with working on Sabbath. If you have to, you have to. Yeah, right. Even where our own institutions take our young people out and go out and cut people's grass and paint their houses and things like that on the Sabbath. Now that's a worthy endeavor to do that, but why not go the next day, like God said? Well, because that's going to cut into my time. You see, I can't do anything on Sabbath anyway. This is the concept. On and on, this type of thing goes. Well, we'll bring the bands in. We can't get the people out there to come, so we'll bring the bands in and the drums and all of this type of thing, and we'll entertain them. Do you know that when you do that, you do bring more people to church? That's a given. You entertain them, they'll come. You play bingo, they'll come. You feed them, they'll come. You give them a free highball, they'll come. But the church becomes weak and shallow and spiritually dead.
Yes. Amen.
It's a problem, friends, that we're facing today. Verse 27 here says, we will worship the Lord our God as He shall command us. Has God changed? So do you think we should still worship God the way God says we are to worship Him? Yeah. Or should we try to improvise and bring the world and bring all of the Babylonian, Egyptian, and Philistine things that we can into the church to make the pagans happy? No. You see, that's the problem we're facing today. Worship God as He commands. And that is the only way to worship God. As one guy said, you worship God your way, I'll worship God my way. And the other one says, no, you worship God your way and I'll worship God His way. That's the only way to worship Him. The second compromise is in verse 28 of chapter 8 here. Verse 28. Pharaoh said, I will let you go that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not what? Okay, you can leave Egypt if you want, but don't go that far away. 3 days out is too far. Don't go very far. Stay on the borders. Stay on the borders. keep within our reach. Don't be cut off from all that we have to offer you. Stay here close by. Don't let your religion isolate you from us. Just take a short trip outside for the sake of your religion, if you must. But stay close. Don't go very far. There are many Christians today trying to do exactly that. They make their excursions outside of the world for a brief time on Sabbath. Some of them for a little more time. They'll come for Sabbath school and church. And then they go back into Egypt again. People that I know of that will come to church, but then they'll go back home and they'll watch their ball games. They'll go downtown to the stores. They will go to church and go to the racetrack. Very close personal friends of mine have done that. Go to the racetrack. I had people come to me once and said, I thought so-and-so was a member of your church. I said, yeah, they are. This is not here, by the way, so don't look at each other on this one. I said, yeah, they are. They said, well, I thought you folk weren't supposed to go out and do worldly things on the Sabbath. I said, no, we're not. I said, well, you know, I saw them at the racetrack this last Saturday. I said, no, they were at church. Well, they might have been in the morning, but Saturday afternoon they were at the racetrack with me. They looked rather sheepish when we saw them, too. You see, what do we think we're doing? We make these excursions. An elder in a church in Los Angeles, he's in church every Sabbath. He's an elder in the church. During the week, he's dealing blackjack in Vegas. He makes his excursions just a little bit outside the borders. It's a problem, friends. They could spend 4 hours on the Super Bowl, but how much can they Amen.